Okay, and
Hello.
welcome to the channel. And how are you doing, Chloe?
Good. Well, I feel like I'm going through a bit of a process this year.
Okay.
It's been quite an emotional one,
Yeah.
prolonged things. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to take our pain and turn it into power. So
Good.
we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about grief. So this is something that I've been asked a lot about by people recently. What's the different types of processing of grief? And I thought we had a chat, didn't we? And I said it might be worth doing a series of short videos,
3 minutes or something.
Yeah, like just sort of literally types of grief. And having then spoken to certain people, they said, oh, they'd like to come on and talk about the grief that they've been through. And I know that you've been through certain types of grief, and myself likewise. And I think if we sort of speak about those different aspects of grief and then get people to come on who are
Grieving.
Yeah, or who have grieved a certain, sort of
Pressure,
situation or challenge or whatever.
And grief is, sorry to interrupt you, grief is something that we can't escape. Every human being is going to experience some sort of grief in their life as part of being in duality and having a flesh suit with a nervous system.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think one of the areas that I'm going to talk about is something that's very personal to me, is the loss of my best friend to suicide. And that was something that I had to go through a certain grieving process with. So I'm going to do a video specifically on that and the kind of the things that it brought up for me personally, and I'm going to say the actions I took to try and deal with that grief. And
we can make some mistakes when we're grieving. We can do some harmful things to ourselves because of grief.
Yeah, 100%. And as I say, so that's something that I'm going to do a video on, and then you're going to do one on what particular grief are you going to talk about?
I've had quite a few different griefs sort of smushed in together. But it was triggered by death of loved ones last year that really helped me go into, and that was, I would say, normal grieving.
Right.
But then it really helped me go into like prolonged grief, and I've had a lot of trauma, so it got really sort of held in my body. And the body keeps a score. I don't know if anyone's read that book, but basically grief has been all consuming for me, or it was almost like it become like an armor that had like hardened me inside, to be able to access my own feelings and being able to sort of healthily process through it. So it started coming out more like anger and frustration. So it sort of, because I wasn't honouring the sad part of the grief, it had sort of metamorphosized into, it's going to be a pain in my body, or it's screaming for my attention, and I have to really sit with myself and feel my way through things.
Yeah. Okay. And you're going to do a video on that, aren't you? So a specific video on that. And then, as I say, then we're going to have people actually coming onto the channel who are going to be people
having some challenges.
Yeah. We've got one very special guest who's going to come on, Jean, who's currently going through a grieving process currently, where the person is actually still alive,
which is very challenging.
Which is really challenging. But I'm not qualified to talk about that, and nor are you. And I think with Jean, she's going to come on and have a chat about that, because she's actually living that experience now.
And also, I think being empathic to the fact that grief affects people differently, and sometimes we're grieving stuff and we don't even realise that we're actually going through a transition of change. Like, you can grieve a loss of a job, or a loss of a relationship, or a loss of a pet, and other people wouldn't even acknowledge that as a side of grief when it was actually a massive part of your life. So there is sort of, culturally, we don't really give people that much space to grieve. Like, we'll support them if it's a funeral up to that point, but it's sort of almost like the delayed grief, or the long-term effects of grief. People are generally left on their own to handle it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention that, because I'm thinking back to the year 1998 when I first really encountered grief of a family member, and that was my grandmother. And bless her, she went out shopping for the day and literally collapsed of a heart attack in the car park,
Oh,
and never made it back home, obviously.
that's really sad. Shock as well.
And it was a shock. So there was a number of different aspects to that grief. But one thing that you've just mentioned there is about that sort of time period. And I remember I had obviously time off from work for things like the funeral.
But after the funeral, that's when you start really grieving, and that's when you seem to have
it could
the
be
least
different.
amount.
It could be different with different people. But what was interesting in this case was the fact that I had I think it was like 2 or 3 days off from the initial passing of my grandmother.
It's not very long though.
Which is not very long. Yeah, and then I went straight back into work, and I think it was like it's a long time ago, but let's say 2 weeks for argument's sake.
And how did you feel like at work in that?
Well, this is the thing. So in that time, I kind of tried to put the sort of the brave face on and just soldier on. But I remember there was one day where I was sat behind my desk and I just started bursting into tears.
Yeah.
And my line manager and my area manager were in the back office, and I could overhear a conversation that my area manager was having with my line manager.
With a lack of empathy?
Yeah. So what he turned around and I overheard him say it, and I had to really bite my tongue. He said, isn't Chris over that yet? And I thought, first of all, how insensitive.
How insensitive, but how can you say how much somebody loves somebody that you could actually...
Yeah, as if you flick a switch of turn on the grief, turn off the grief sort of thing.
I would say people like that are more in their left brain. So left-brained people are more think through emotions logically. So it's not that they don't have emotions, but it's almost like everything gets compartmentalised. A bit like the working system in the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
Everyone's put in a box.
Yeah.
Everybody's expected to reform into this behaviour, and emotions are uncomfortable. And I found with circumstances that I've had to grieve that have been a situation that nobody else understands. I'm feeling so alienated as a result, because other people, even though they tried to care, the fact that they didn't understand was like, oh, aren't you over this? Or oh, that was a long time ago now, Chloe. And it's sort of almost like my whole identity got stripped, and and when you're grieving somebody or something, it is a death of identity, because it's not just the connection with that person, it's a part of your history as well.
But also what's interesting is, and I don't know if I've been always fortunate to kind of try and process my grief there and then, or as close to the incident or moment or whatever it is. But some people suppress grief. I did,
and I became a drug addict as a result of it. So I wasn't grieving, and my way of dealing with the pain inside of me was to take something to try and cover it up.
Right.
And then your body becomes dependent on something to feel partly disassociated.
So where did that grief? I know you're going to talk about this in a specialised episode.
That was a different grief. I've had a lot. I've actually think I've encountered quite a lot of grief in my life. I feel like I've gone through like different phases of different encounters.
But that grief that you were trying to suppress, did it then come back up and kind of almost rear its ugly head at a later date?
If anything, I'd abused my body on top of not being able to handle a trauma and a shock.
Yeah.
So instead, because I wasn't emotionally mature enough or able to really deal with the mass that I was experiencing inside, so I was trying anything to just cover it up, push it away, and a lot of my grief I come across when I'm depressed as a happy griever sort of thing, that I can be really chirpy and positive when other people are around, but as soon as the door closes I'm crying again. So I repressed it because I was so traumatized at the time I couldn't handle it. So that was the only thing that I knew, like I felt like I was in control of something, but actually not only did I have to deal with overcoming the addiction and then all the shame and grief and the reality of what you've done to your own your body as a result, it's almost like a punishment. Then there's a grief that comes with the awareness that you've made errors, but then there's also the grief, the aftermath of everything that you refuse to feel. But it hits you harder when it's prolonged and delayed, I find. A lot of mine has been, to the point of it floors me, and I'll have a breakdown or something will happen where I literally I cannot stop, and I have to just surrender and completely feel everything and completely sort of almost psychologically having to work your way back to yourself. Right. So actually, and I think men particularly in this world of how you're conditioned to like man up, don't have feelings, don't be a little girl, like how abusive that is to tell a small boy that it's inhuman for them to have human experience.
Sure.
So like men are almost like completely mastered the art of suppressing, haven't they?
Yeah.
Suppressing yourselves, suppressing your feelings.
Yeah.
You just abuse each other for sport. It almost seems like
absolutely.
So do you know, like culturally, like
culture plays a big part, doesn't it?
There's different, and also I think women are allowed to be more emotional than men, even though men have as many emotions as a woman. So we're living sort of in this duality of like your personal relationship with yourself. That's a thing that you've got to work through with grief. The actual physical impact that it has on your body, like where you're depressed or you can't function. It's almost like you are not a functioning person. If you have a shower, then that's a win, you know. And then you've got the grief of like I lost a couple of friends to suicide as well, and you feel like you're responsible, like I should have called them that night, or why didn't I tell? So you almost start thinking like, well, if I'd actually stepped in, then maybe this wouldn't be the situation.
And that's something I think I'm going to talk about in the episode that I'm going to do, because there's certainly things that resonate.
And then you've got a
with
loss.
Me.
You've got not just a loss of a family member that was a big part of your support system. People that lose children, or people that have miscarriages. Like that's still a grief, isn't it? And they're griefs that other people won't necessarily relate to. So it's almost like a lot of grief, I think, is a very personal thing.
Absolutely.
And it's a very raw thing.
Yeah.
But it gets you to experience every different lens of the human emotion.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to try and do, is to get people to come on and chat about their own personal experiences, and if it relates to, you know, again, I always say if it relates to one person and it can make a positive difference and help just one person, and then you share it and help with someone else or whatever, then it's done what it was supposed to do.
And also to realise that there's no shame in having emotions to a normal situation. Like if you care about something deeply, or sometimes it's a grief like say you're dating and it was the potential of the person that you're grieving. You're grieving your limerence to the situation. So there are different ways that people can grieve, and like it doesn't always necessarily have to be because there's a death or something really tragic.
Okay.
But also like I think probably one of the most traumatic things for anyone would be losing a child, and the process that you have to unravel. And also the parts of yourself that you miss out on because you're grieving. It's like when you come out of it, I always feel like I'm not quite the same as I was. It's like I feel like I've grown in a way, which is good, and I'm grateful that I'm not in like the rawness of it. But what I also find when tragedies happen, it also reminds me of other things that I hadn't dealt with. So your grief of one thing can tap you into a load of other griefs.
Right. Almost like a domino.
Yeah,
like
like
if
you're heartbroken, you'll remember every heartbreak. So it's sort of almost like, I think grief is for your humanity in a way.
Okay. So I think this is going to be quite an interesting series that we're going to do, isn't it?
Hopefully, we're all damaged.
So and as I say, by trying to sort of be as, you know, sort of open about it, and you know, as I say, speak from our own personal experiences.
It's a sensitive subject. And I also think it would also be nice maybe if I did like a little recorded relaxation healing that people can listen to if they are in an emotional state, to try and sort of regulate themselves a little bit. Because things like that, I think anything that you can do that will bring you back to a mindful moment, like the sun's on my face and that's a nice couple of seconds, or I can feel the like water on my skin when I'm having a shower, or like, I really like the taste of what I'm eating. Just little sensory things that you can bring you back into relaxation is actually going to help you. And I know it sounds really bizarre, like, well, why do I want to pay attention to something that I do every day? But it's sort of like bringing your attention to things like that will give you your nervous system a sense of normality and safety, and you can build new normality and safety around the grief process. But also there's a part of you that there comes a point where you have to let go of. Sometimes it can become a bit of identity as well.
Yeah, and I've seen that certainly around a couple of the subjects that you've just spoken about. So certainly around loss of a child, and certainly around something like suicide as well. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there with this introduction, and then, as I say, then we'll bring the independent videos in, and then as I say, hopefully they can help people out there. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.
And if anyone is grieving, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah,
it will get better.
Absolutely.
Just give it time.
Great.